Welcome everybody to day 30 of my daily vlog challenge. Where has the time gone? Yeah, I feel like the last week has gone way too quickly. I've had so many ideas for videos and because I've not been great, I've not been able to do half of them, which is a little frustrating. However, there is always August and I don't have to do it as a challenge. I can do them as and when I'm able. So I think there's much to be celebrated, not just lamented this month. But with no further ado, I thought today, as I'm a bit stuck indoors, I could talk about how I'm finding using public transport, and especially with buses, because I do tend to use buses more than trains, mainly because of the cost and the reliability issue. But when I talk about reliability, hear the suspense pause in my voice when I say that. There was no suspense there, was there? But definitely, yeah, I can't say that I've had anything awful happen whilst I've been accessing outdoor spaces and planning adventures and things. You'll probably notice if you've had a look on my homepage that there's a playlist called Purple Day Busathon. So if I've referred to a trip, quite often this month it's a trip that I did going from Berwick-upon-Tweed to Land's End via bus, and I spent 2.5 weeks travelling basically across England. It's the most northerly part of England to the other end, basically. It's a bit like the John O'Groats to Land's End, but just England rather than Scotland as well. And so I learned an awful lot about travelling via bus in all sorts of places, not just my local area. So I feel like I've got quite a bit of experience to talk about, and it's wide and varied. So what can I say first? I think the first thing to say is I think if you're organised and you know your bus timetable and you've planned for an eventuality of what if this bus doesn't turn up, you're going to be fine. I'm slightly amazed and think by God's grace sometimes that I've made every bus pretty much that I've wanted to make, bar one, and that's when I did the Windrush Way and I missed the last bus from Winchcombe. But thankfully a friend picked me up from Winchcombe because it's just the town across from Cheltenham, so it's not ideal, but at least it's not like I was in, I don't know, the Peak District. That would have been a bit of an error. And you know, it would have been a bit of a walk home from Winchcombe. It probably would have taken me about 8 hours and arrived home at 2 in the morning. So I am glad that I didn't have that to contend with. But obviously there also was a taxi. I could have got a taxi if I really needed to, but that would have been an awful lot of money. So I'm grateful either way that my friend got me out of that tricky situation. But otherwise, actually, buses, it's not been the bus's fault most of the time. It's in that instance that was me missing the bus rather than the bus not turning up. So I've not actually had that many problems with buses. I think if you do your research, and I will often look at a bus stop that I've never been before, say I've planned a route on Google Maps and it says that there's a stop in this area, on Google Maps, you know, you see that blue square, you think, great, bus stop. But then I'll just double check that there is definitely a bus there on the timetable that often is shown on the side of Google Maps. If you click, I think it's show departures, it will show you the buses that are due there, but also the local bus company. So in my area, Stagecoach serves most of the area, and so I can go on the Stagecoach app and see whether there's a stop there and whether they show that there's buses regularly going there. So that's just a little bit of a reassurance that the bus is definitely going to stop at that stop. But as I hinted at, I think it was yesterday, that when I wanted to go to Painswick, whatever that video was, that they've changed all the buses in that area. And actually when I did go to Painswick, Beacon, which is just north of Painswick, there's a little road that has a load of bus stops along it. But when I looked on Google Maps, the bus stop that I went to catch the bus back on looked fine, actually. It was a nice open space, and the bus dropped me on the other side fine, so I didn't think there'd be a problem. But when I waved down the bus on the way back, he got very angry and said there's not a bus stop here, even though it was clearly on the app and clearly on Google Maps, and wanted me to walk another, I don't know, 5-10 minutes down the road where there's no verge, as it was just going to be on a busy road. That would have been really dangerous. So I'm not surprised that buses very rarely go down that. I think there's 1 or 2 a day that go down that road. I can't imagine people would be using those bus stops because, I mean, unless you wanted to walk up Painswick Beacon, there's no reason, there's nothing else there. So I can see why they've changed that. And the bus now goes down another route that also has a nice area, and it does seem that their bus stops are a little bit more designed as bus stops, an actual area you could stand at that's not in the middle of the road. So I do have experiences where you think, really? I'm not sure this is a good idea, but most of the time it's fine. I find in the Cotswold area, from here south west, I have to think about that, of the Cotswolds. So I'm in Cheltenham. Anywhere southwest, I've not had any big issues getting buses to or trains to, or I say trains, but I normally go by bus anyway, or get a train and then a bus to somewhere, and I've never had a problem. However, going further northeast, there's just hardly any buses from here that go northeast. Yeah, you've got one that goes to Winchcombe, but then there's only 1 or 2 a day that go further afield. And if you want to get to other parts of the Cotswolds, Bourton the Water, there's actually quite a few that go there. But towards the real beginning of like the Cotswold Way, I don't find that there's an awful lot, or you have to catch quite a few buses that don't seem very often, and it doesn't seem very easy to get to. So that's a bit of a shame, because I'm sure they're really quite nice places and there's lots of walks around there, but getting there is just a little bit trickier. And the bus reliability in Cheltenham in general, it has been awful the past year, but I've not had quite as few issues, maybe in the last month or 2. So I feel like a lot of town areas probably do have quite big issues with bus reliability. You only have to have a little bit of traffic somewhere and it sends all of the bus service haywire. So I feel like we're more susceptible because of shortages in bus drivers, and also just you only have to have a little bit of traffic somewhere and it just blocks everything up. So I feel like I wouldn't always rely on buses to get to bus transport here, but actually there are regular buses. It's just if I was getting to appointments or to work and stuff. So I've talked a little bit about reliability. I guess the other thing to note is the cost. Now in England there's a £2 cap. I don't know when that's due to end. It keeps getting moved onwards and onwards, so I imagine it might be October time or something like that. So that's actually very good value for money, in that you only ever have to pay £2 each leg that you make in general. So I say in general because there are occasions, I'm guessing, where you might want to buy a day ticket, but most of the time the single £2 fare is one of the cheapest ways to do your journey, and that's quite handy, especially if I'm using my bus pass and I'm using it before 9:30 because it doesn't kick in until 9:30 in England. If you can hear banging, I do apologise. That's the joys of living in a block of flats. So I do think that that's great in England. When you go into Wales, I have noticed their fares have gone up. They're not as bad as when I go to Scotland. I appreciate often when you go to Scotland you get a bus and it seems to go a long distance because they mainly use more of a coach style system in some instances. I'm thinking of the buses that go from say Glasgow up to Oban or Inverness or places like that. They're big distances and you're more likely to get a bit more of a coach service than a bus. But also, even when I was doing my travel trip and I had to go slightly into Scotland to get out of Scotland because it's a diagonal, and if I wanted to go south, I would have had to go to Newcastle, and I decided, well, I need to just get across, so I just decided to go the easiest way, and the easiest way was to get into Scotland and go down just a little bit, just over the borders. And I couldn't believe how expensive it was. I think I spent 20 quid that day getting across. It was using 2 routes. I don't know if there was a cheaper way of doing it, perhaps, but yeah, that was an expensive day, and I feel like you could easily spend quite a lot of money using bus fares in Scotland. For some reason, I found them quite expensive, but obviously in England it doesn't. And I use my bus pass, as I say, so I've used I've got epilepsy, which is the reason why I qualify for that. I should not be on a road driving, even without epilepsy, to be quite frank. I think if I ever had to fill a form with other health conditions that would stop me from driving, I think there's plenty on the list that I could put down. So I am going to qualify, I think, for a bus pass, even if I don't have a seizure for a year, which I always have. I've always had a seizure in the years, so I think I'm never gonna. So I'm itchy at the minute. So I think I was referring there to the fact that I think I will always qualify for a bus pass, and that does make a difference to where I can get to. Wouldn't influence my job at all, because it's before 9:30. When I'm on an early shift, I've always had to pay for the bus anyway, but that's life, and I feel grateful that it's the only perk of having epilepsy. Everything else is pretty pants, to be honest. But I do use my bus pass, and I have found using the buses pretty okay. I thought I'd share some of the funny moments that I've had with using the buses. So when I went from Leominster to Hereford, I went on a mystery tour. I got to Leominster on my trip, and I ended up getting off at the bus stop or station, whatever, and I saw that there was a bus saying it was going to Hereford. Didn't recognise the number, but thought nothing of it at the time, and off we went. And then there was this couple right at the back going, "This isn't the way it goes." And I was thinking, well, this is interesting, and we just went on this tour. It just wiggled its way down to Hereford. We didn't pass many bus stops, I don't think, from my recollection, but we did end up in Hereford. And because I hadn't been to the part of Hereford that it went into, I didn't know all the bus stops, so it obviously came to a stop that was popular for people getting off, and I asked the bus driver if this was the last stop, and he just looked at me as if he was gonna kill me. No joke. And so I just stood there, because I thought, well, I'd like an answer if possible. And he just gave me a look. He just kept looking at me as if I was a piece of dirt. I thought, okay, maybe I'll just leave then and find my own way around. Yeah, that was a funny journey. And yeah, I'll never forget the look in his eyes. I was like, "You're a bus driver, not a sniper." Unless he had a previous life, and it's given him a serious look. Anyways, that was funny, and I had a really funny journey going from Taunton, or it wasn't Sidmouth, Seaton or Honington. I think I was going to Honington from Taunton, and I caught this bus that was, I think it only ran a couple of times a week. It was a regular bus, as it wasn't often. One of those community buses, and I got on it, and it went down these lanes it was such a fun journey. The potholes, the bus got stuck, and a tractor had to come and rescue it out. And all of the local older ladies were on there. They all knew each other. The bus driver knew them all. They were obviously talking about how this happens fairly frequently, and why they don't sort the roads out. Well, I know if there's a bus route that goes down that lane, I don't know anybody that would have got on the bus on them, but hey, who am I to judge? And it was just funny. I mean, I was just glad to get to the other end. I don't think there's any times I've missed connections, but I normally plan for that. So yeah, that wasn't a particular drama, but I think in that instance, if I had to get onto another bus, and there were irregular buses as well, I would have had an issue, but that was really funny. I'm sure there were others, but those are the two main ones that stick out. And reliability on timetable, sometimes when the bus times go from a winter time to a summertime timetable, or the other way around, quite often you'll find that they've updated the app and everything and the timetable on the wall or whatever by the bus stop way before the change actually happened. So I got to Bude expecting to be able to go onwards. There were a load of people waiting with me. Turned out the bus timetable didn't kick in until a couple of days later, so we were waiting for this bus that was never going to turn up. So you get issues, and in most cases it's actually quite amusing, but yeah, it is what it is. We live in a country that's just not very reliable, I think, for public transport, but I've actually never had any big issues. Say, if on a day trip when I've planned to go, say, into Wales, Brecon Beacons, I've never had an issue. And I could say touch wood, but I don't believe that in that anyway. But yeah, in general, it's been fine. My top tips, I don't really have any top tips other than to reassure you that I think it is really possible to access outdoors with using a bus pass, or getting a bus somewhere, or getting a train. I have had more issues with trains than I have with buses, but generally you are going to get a train eventually that comes through, so you're less likely to be stranded in the middle of nowhere. It's just more of a reliability thing with trains. So with some of the buses, they're very infrequent, and so if you miss one, the next one might be in 2 hours' time. So that's more of an inconvenience than a safety thing in most cases. I would definitely, if you are going to be going into the mountains or for a particularly long day and you're using public transport, take some spare clothes with you, because there's been times where it's been wet and it's been miserable, and either the water's got through or I've got hot and bothered, and it's been really nice to just take a spare mid-layer and perhaps t-shirt to change into for the journey home. So I've got a little down jacket that I'll sometimes wear on the bus on the way home, just because the times that I've got hypothermia have been on public transport on the way home, and it's been just because I've been exposed to the cold weather, and either the breathability of the clothing's not been quite right, or I've just been a bit sensitive. I do wear layers that are well suited for the outdoors. I think in the times when I have been a bit unwell, because I've got off top of the mountains or the hills or the moors or whatever, and I've ended up with a bit of mild hypothermia kicking in, it is normally that I've had breathable layers on, but it's only breathable to a certain extent. Things are only waterproof to a certain extent. Just pack as if it's all going to go wrong and actually you'd be fine, as in pack as if you're going to get soaking wet, and then if you do get soaking wet, well, at least you've got some clean clothes to get into when you get to the bottom. Most people, if you're driving, will keep some spare things in the car, in the boot or somewhere. I don't have that luxury, so I like to make sure that I take just that little bit more. I don't need to take the kitchen sink, but I do plan for the fact that I might be out a lot longer than most people would for the same kind of adventure. So when you're walking from a bus stop to a route, quite often you're having to walk ages to even get to the car park that most people would go to then walk up to this viewpoint or whatever. So it's just being prepared for the extra effort that's required, and it does. I think it requires an awful lot more commitment and time to get outdoors if you're relying on public transport, but my advice and my top tip would be it is totally worth it. I really enjoy going to the wilder places, and yeah, I'd rather be on a plateau exposed to them, to all the elements, than on a little park. So I definitely think it's worth spending 3-4 hours travelling to the Brecon Beacons than it is to stay here. So I think that is me done for today. I hope that's been helpful, and I will see you tomorrow.